Hi guys, this is Luetin, and today we're going to be talking about the future of gaming and all its various aspects. I'm joined today by DCRU Colin, Matimi0. I'm joined by Intheworksmedia, Levelcap, and John from Battlefield Friends, who's the engineer, of course. So we've got a huge range of topics that we're going to be looking at. So I'm not even sure where I want to begin with this one because there is literally so much to talk about. But seeing as Colin actually had a couple of ideas already, whilst I can look at some things. Colin, what was one of the things that you wanted to jump in that you were talking about?
I kind of want to talk about, the future of console gaming and where that's going. And, it's been a while now. What is it, 7 or 8 years since the last generation of console was released. So, they've really milked this generation for all it's worth. And, with new consoles potentially coming in the next 12 to 24 months, will this be it for consoles? I think that they're going to focus more on them being multimedia entertainment hubs, can also play games. I think that they're going to go more for multifunction, and some of the specs that I've seen, they already have the graphics capability, far below what's already available on PC. So is hardcore gaming, and many would argue that hardcore gaming is already on the PC, is it going to trend more in that direction, and where do you think the console manufacturers are going to go? I think, my opinion, not to poison the well, is that they are going to head more in the multimedia entertainment direction, with gaming as almost like a secondary function of the box.
I think that each company, from what I've seen and what I've read and what I've heard, they seem to have their own game plan. And I think very much the gaming console companies anyway are trying not to overlap too much, because I think they're well aware that if they do that and there's enough room for them to kind of develop their own identities. I think the Wii and Nintendo, they've obviously for ages now been focusing on a different market to sort of the Xbox and the PS3. But as well, some of the notes that I had down and that I was talking about here was that obviously with the Wii U, which everyone has seen by now, they're obviously going in this kind of more interesting direction, and they're trying to combine tablet technology. I think it's interesting, the idea of bringing in tablets and stuff like this. My personal opinion is that whether or not consoles go forward will be determined by this next generation, because they're looking again at probably a 10-year lifespan for these new consoles, and at the end of that 10 years or towards the end of that will probably be determining how they go forward. The difficulty of having such a long lifespan is that technology, as we've seen as well with PCs and stuff, how quickly things change and how they get upgraded. Having a very long lifespan like that, when back with the PS2 and those kind of that situation, so 8 years ago, whatever it was, that time period, up until that point they'd had very small changes in terms of the consoles. The turnaround for new consoles wasn't that long. I mean, what was it, 4 years, something like that? 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, it was pretty quick, actually. And you might even say that PCs are driving the console turnaround now, because if you think about how long the Xbox and PlayStation 3 have lasted, it's because when they came out, they were pretty ahead of the previous generation systems. And now people are complaining, again, I got to relate to Battlefield, but it's like consoles can't play the bigger games yet. Graphics still look pretty good, but whenever you compare it to, say, the PC, which is always on the cutting edge, then you're like, oh man, consoles are so old and bad or whatever, but they can still play a huge variety of games. And it's pretty amazing, even graphically, how much they've been able to improve games like, say, Halo, from the beginning of the 360 to where it is now. They've really found ways to just keep them going. So the next generation of consoles, I can easily see that going longer. It really depends how much they go back and forth with titles being both on the console and PC until people start comparing the two and seeing oh man, PC's way ahead of the time. Again, we got to upgrade consoles.
Well, I remember, if I can just say, guys, there was one thing that I remember was that when the PS3 was initially coming out, and I remember about 1 or 2 years into it, I read an interview and an article with, I think it was the second in command at Sony or something like that. Second in command, they're not military, but they gave a big interview about the PS3 and what their kind of idea was it. And with the PS2, I remember what they had said was that basically towards the end of the PS2, they found that developers were starting to get more out of it in that time frame. So they wanted to extend it to allow, with the next generation, to allow developers to get more out of it. Like you're saying, Level, it's interesting how much they can get out of it, but they're limited in terms of what they can actually push forward. Now, an interesting point to make with that was that the idea of cloud networks and what they could hold and so on and so on, and the idea that maybe you wouldn't even need, an actual games machine to run the system. It could all be done externally at server farms and stuff like this. They could actually hold the entire game, and your unit in your lounge would literally just be a kind of a hub or a portal to connect to that game. So you wouldn't necessarily need hardware within the system itself. It could all be done externally, and the same could be said for PCs. And this is what a lot of tech people that I've seen talking about this kind of stuff have said in the very future. When I say the very future, it could literally be 10, 15 years, something like this. But what they need is an infrastructure to be able to do that. So they need to increase fiber optic broadband connections everywhere. And I think I saw that in the US, they said in some areas they were starting to roll out like 100 meg broadband connections all over the place and stuff. And there was definitely some talk about Google. Where the hell was it? Somewhere in the US, I can look that up. I'll try and, by the way, link a lot of the stuff that I talk about or any products we mention in the notes, so you guys can go through, find videos or find articles to read about this stuff. But yeah, it was somewhere in the US they were saying that Google's got a project to roll out these very high-spec broadbands and have all cloud-based technology. So it's kind of interesting that, it's understandable that consoles can be limited in terms of their lifespan, but perhaps, they have an initial good start off, but it gets more difficult over time. But at the same time, like you say, developers can get more out of it. John, what do you think about this stuff with the consoles and their lifespan?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on it. It really is going to depend on what the next generation does. Like the next generation of consoles is going to be sort of the make or break period for this whole thing, because I kind of feel like the console makers, as far as consoles in general, I feel like they're in trouble. And publishing as well, just because we're moving towards this ability for like televisions to be already connected online. So what do we do when we get to the point where, okay, our televisions are already online? Do we just go out and buy a controller? Now we can just log online and just play games right there in our living room? I mean, we may get to the point where we don't need, our television is our set-top box. We don't have a set-top box. It's a television connected to the internet, and we just have maybe a PlayStation brand or Xbox brand controller. And I see basically those companies acting more as the aggregators in a similar fashion like YouTube, where, okay, here are the games we produce. You have their controller, play them.
I mean, it might be that they provide certain peripherals or something like this when you think about Nintendo and the kind of stuff they provide in terms of touchscreen technology and stuff like this. But, this is something else that's been said as well. When you think about televisions are far behind technology in terms of what they provide right now. Okay, right. There are some that are up there, and they've started, who was it? Was it Samsung started doing like a touchscreen thing, I think, where it kind of like Kinetic. Where you can kind of move.
Where you can do the motions.
Yeah, you can do the motion things
to control it.
Now, I'm kind of unconvinced by a lot of motion technology. However, I do think that it's kind of becoming more and more apparent, and it really is kind of sort of infantish, really, where it's coming from. And I think more and more along the lines will go. And that kind of, all this stuff kind of ties in together. And I know Matimi0 I mentioned to him earlier about the Leap, and you kind of had seen the Leap already, hadn't you, Matimi0? You'd seen something about it?
Briefly, I just know that it's like extremely highly accurate, and it's a motion control thing that you can kind of put in front of your computer screen, and you just use your fingers to navigate and move the screen around you like a map, kind of. It's kind of that's all I really know about it, to be honest.
It's basically, if you guys haven't seen this, and I think I linked it, was the Leap. Okay, it's basically about the size of an iPod or something, and you place it in front of your computer screen, and it basically will pick up the movements of your fingertips, but I think they said 200% more accurate than anything else that's available. So literally, if you check out the video, which I will link as well, guys, you'll see that basically you can just pick things up off the screen, and it really is like if you've seen Minority Report or in the Matrix when they're moving things around with their hands. It's just like that, no exaggeration. So you can really imagine that, for example, with television or anything like this, with your media hub or whatever it is that you have, you can literally grab, move, turn things around. And, me as an illustrator and artist as well, the idea that you could perhaps, there are already touch screens that you can paint on. There's Wacom screens and stuff that you can do, as well as Wacom tablets and stuff like that. But the idea that you could perhaps move and, the whole movement of your hand gets in there. And when you think about the kind of games that have been developed in terms of sport and stuff like that, with the Wii nunchucks or any of the nunchucks, they tend to be based more on just kind of a generally vague movement rather than anything that's specifically accurate, but more and more with these kind of things, with the accuracy they provide, it could be amazing what they could do. And depending on how far these things go, it's the kind of stuff which you could start looking into other applications for, like perhaps I sort of was thinking on the lines of, if it's so accurate and so intuitive, you could do very, very precise things. It could be anything that's used in medical, it could be perhaps used for people rehabilitating, it could have military purposes and all these kind of stuff. All these technologies are coming forward and they're really, really quite interesting. But I'm going to go with Jake here. Jake, have you got anything to think about these kind of motion controls? I mean, do you hate them right now? Do you think they're developing in a really positive way and what their further applications could be?
I'm not a huge fan of motion controls personally. Like when the Kinect first came out, my buddy got one, and honestly, it was one of the most like awkward things I've ever done. Because I don't know if you guys have stood there in like the living room and like told Netflix to turn on. It's kind of creepy knowing that Kinect is always watching you. And like you'll be sitting there in game and like you may like be just talking to someone like and it'll do something and it'll totally like back you out to the Xbox menu if you make like the wrong movement with your hand. Like I think his girlfriend walked through the room and like waved her hand and it totally just completely turned off the system. So I can see where people want the convenience of it, but at the same time I think it's too primitive to really be an applicable like gaming
exactly
feature.
But that's
like,
where
it's
the
more
leap
like a
comes
gimmick
in
right now, and I think it still needs to evolve into
if you
robust.
sneeze you reformat the thing, so
I think that other industries are going to drive the development, whether it's motion controls. Other industries are already heavily moving towards like cloud computing, to touch back on our previous topic. So I think that gaming, because the current generation of consoles have been around for so long, they haven't been driving development as quickly as other industries. Whereas, when it comes to like PC hardware and graphics and that sort of thing, like gaming and like porn would tend to drive things forward. So I always got to get that in there. But, I think that I'm not really bought into the current motion controls that are commercially available for gaming, but there are development kits out there for technology that's far superior, that they're kind of opening up and they're selling it like I forget the name of it, a very low price, these development kits. And I think we're going to see some amazing things that we haven't even really thought of yet in the motion control realm, which could be coupled with the cloud computing. Things could be going places. But
motion
I think
control porn. There you go, Colin.
I think we've already talked about my affinity or my lack thereof for HD porn. Like, no, just leave it as is. It's good. It's good the way it is.
But
a little bit fuzzy.
I mean, I don't think a lot of people realize like how groundbreaking that thing was. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it still exists, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't think it's had a huge take rate, but I think that people are resistant to change to a certain extent. But the current model of you go out to the store, you buy the console, you plug it into your TV, you sit on your couch with a controller and look at the TV screen. And I think that that's going to go away. And whether it's some sort of a peripheral that you wear, that it I think that portability, being able to game any place, anywhere at the, with the same quality that you do in front of your PC, I think that that's sort of the ultimate destination for the gaming industry. So, you slap some glasses on and you're carrying something like your iPhone or whatever in your pocket, and you can just sit there and game away online multiplayer anywhere. I
think we're a ways off from that becoming mainstream, and here's why.
Absolutely.
When I say a ways off, I mean like 100 years off or something. Because
no way.
Because here's the thing. So the cloud-based stuff is great for applications and simple games, but for the games that we all play, like first-person shooters and stuff, where you need that millisecond reaction time, we're never going to have that unless we're doing all the calculations and rendering and all that stuff on our side, because there's a huge amount of information that actually has to come back to the console on your side. And if it's adding like even 100 milliseconds of delay, that's going to be a deal breaker for a lot of people, like myself included. And so I think the hardcore gaming and the intense gaming that's going to require the best graphics, because graphics really does drive gaming these days, is you're going to need expensive hardware to do that. And all the fun little Pokemon stuff or the 2D stuff, whatever, that'll be fine. That can probably all run in the cloud universe and stuff, but Battlefield games and Call of Duty games and all that stuff probably going to still need a console or a computer or something that you're going to have to buy to run that stuff.
It's interesting that you say about that, though. The thing is, though, when you think about what we actually have achieved in the last 20 years in terms of how fast technology has moved forwards, 20 years ago we were running with a Game Boy brick, okay, which could barely handle 2D grey screen. It would crack through 4 AA batteries in a couple of hours. If anyone remembers that, it was just a nightmare. You just were out of pocket constantly trying to find batteries for that thing because it would burn through them so fast, and it was basically rendering a 2-inch screen. It was like nothing, and now we've got PS Vita, which is providing almost PlayStation quality graphics. It's got touchscreen, it's got everything, it's got 3G connectivity. You can go anywhere with it, you can take anything, you can store so much on it, and the whole thing of kind of mobile gaming is an intriguing one as to is it going to be successful or not. It's on a knife edge at the moment, to be honest, because Vita sales for the for the Sony side of things have been not good, and understandably so, because who wants to pay £280 or whatever the dollar equivalent is? I don't know what. Do you know offhand what a Vita costs in the US?
No,
it's over 300, isn't it?
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, it would be like 360, 380, something like that. You can pay $380 for a handheld gaming device. That's quite a chunk of money. You could basically buy a PlayStation 3 for that. So it's a significant investment. I think they have recently reduced the price. They cut it by £100, I think, or something like that. But regardless, it's a huge amount of money for someone to pay out. Now, I love PlayStation 3, I love Sony, like you guys know, but I haven't bought a Vita because I got a PSP Go. I bought it, a few years ago now, maybe a couple of years ago for, I don't know, a third of that price, and it does everything that I want in a handheld portable. It gives me something to do on the way to work. I can play some classic games like Final Fantasy VII, or I can play Wipeout HD and all these kind of stuffs. So, it gives me some little bits and pieces to do on the way around. But I don't, I can't see proper gamers wanting to kind of go around and game, because that's not what it's about. It's about sitting and being isolated and kind of disconnecting yourself from everything else. And
that's my problem with motion control.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to move. I want to sit there and bitch out. If I'm getting exercise, it's not my kind of gaming.
What the hell?
So I guess then to kind of follow up on my point, and I'd argue I don't think we're 100 years away from that, but it's not right around the corner. Do you think that the population of hardcore gamers is going to dwindle, and the casual gamers that get snagged up by the gimmicks or the ability to game on the go? Do you think that they become the target market for the gaming industry in general?
They need each other. Okay, I think they need each other. It's a kind of trade-off between the two. I'm going to hand this over to someone now. I'm going to hand this to Jake and see what he's got on this. Casual gamers and hardcore gamers, as far as I'm concerned, it's kind of like a symbiotic relationship. What would you think about that?
The Wii is a classic example of everything we just talked about, because it started off with huge momentum, and they were marketing towards casual gamers. And if you noticed, they lost a lot of the support of the hardcore fans. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the Wii's momentum, it completely died after 2 years.
Yeah.
And they've been struggling along for the past couple of years here, trying to bring back the hardcore gamer. Yeah. I think that proves that they have to coexist to be successful.
Yeah.
I think that's what Xbox is doing very well right now because it's cheap. It's got Kinect. It's got games that are accessible, but on the flip side of the coin, they have games like Call of Duty and Battlefield and all the hardcore games, and Dark Souls, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Whereas the Wii was, for the longest time, that was just shovelware is all they were putting out, like party games and Mario Party 69 and all that kind of stuff. So
Mario Party 69, is that the? I don't want to go back on to. No, we're not going here. This is an intellectual discussion. We're not going down that road. This is Colin's fault. John.
It always is.
Yeah, John, where are you on the whole sort of, I'm going to say, non-gamer market? Where are you with that?
I'm kind of in agreement with. I think everyone's gonna have to coexist. There's going to be something for everybody, because I think games in general are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah. And there's going to be plenty of room for your big games like your Call of Duties, your Battlefield, and also be plenty of room for your smaller games and independently made stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think everything, and we're probably going to have at least in the future, we got tablets, we got PCs, we got the consoles. You know, who knows what else could pop up? I mean, there's so many platforms to play these games on, and everybody kind of gravitates towards, you know, whatever they're interested in. I mean, when I game, I like a console because I animate, so I sit at a computer all day. When I'm ready to game, I don't want to be in front of my computer. I want to be on a couch and just in a relaxed environment. Yeah. And I'm not really into handheld gaming at all. But, you know, there's a large swath of population that loves handheld gaming. Mm-hmm. That's their thing. And so, you know, yeah, everyone, you know, there's plenty of opportunities out there for these game companies to produce something for everyone.
Yeah. Do you think Nintendo made a mistake in kind of putting all their eggs in one basket, as it were, and kind of alienating their market? I'll tell you why. Because I used to love Nintendo, okay? I had a 64, I had a GameCube, which was one of the best consoles ever, to be honest, as far as I'm concerned. GameCube was an amazingly cheap price. It had, you know, fantastic games, really great graphics for its time. It ran really well. The GameCube did everything well. It was a fantastic unit. I really think so. And then it came to the Wii, and it was a big disappointment. The graphics, let's face it, were poor in comparison to everything else that was available. Yeah,
it was basically, well, I mean, I think business model wise, what Nintendo did was awesome for business.
Yes.
If you're looking at it from just a financial perspective, they said, well, let's just basically take the GameCube, update it just a little bit, and put it out as a new system with these motion controls. Mm-hmm. I mean, the whole thing kind of felt like a big experiment. And I think the Wii fell back in recent years. I mean, yeah, when it first came out, it had shovelware, but it also, you know, it had those few great games like Twilight Princess. It had Mario Galaxy. Mario
Galaxy
was good. 2. It definitely has like those few really good hardcore games on the system. But you're right, it got so pounded with shovelware and crap that it just quickly became a joke. And then the graphics, you know, everybody made the switch to HD TVs that, you know, when the Wii came out, not a lot of people had HD TVs. Fast forward 2 years later, everybody's got HD televisions and they want to play their games in HD now. And the Wii does not compensate for that. So, you know, you had two things right there working completely against it that just made it fall to the wayside.
Yeah, I think in fact when the Wii came out, I still didn't even have a flat screen TV. So yeah, it was a while back. I had one of those big back TVs, you know. It was terrible. It was a nightmare to get out of my house, I say. But anyway.
I had the same thing. Yeah, it was ridiculous.
I think it's interesting though to come back as well to talk about the lifespan of games and stuff like this, because as we all know, with longer... I think the very fact that the PS3 and the Xbox have had longer lifespans has slightly driven the way that games are produced. We've seen less and less games from the big developers in terms of they've been putting out one or a couple of big titles each year. And I think this is directly because of the longer lifespan. They know they have a longer time to work with the system, and therefore it means that they spend longer on each game so that they can produce a really good piece of quality work. Level, do you think that is what they're doing, or do you think they have changed the model themselves and it's kind of a coincidental thing? And also, can I say, if you think if consoles disappeared or if they transitioned into something else, some kind of television hybrid where a lot of stuff is cloud-based or whatever, something along those lines, do you think that the way games are being produced now is going to be the precedent for the future, or do you think developers could kind of change the way that they set their timescales for things?
All right. So there's like 10 questions in there. I'm trying to figure out which one to start with.
Yes. I wanted to give you a big ball to play with.
I do think consoles are going to be around for a long time. Like just the culture surrounding consoles. You can have friends over. You can play on multiple controllers. Now it's sort of drifted a little bit more towards like the hardcore guys can just play by themselves but still play with their friends over the internet. I talk to a lot of guys who are console players. They see me play Battlefield on PC and they're like, oh man, I want to try that out. And then they sort of realize the roadblocks in their way from doing that. It's a big step up. So the simplicity of the console is great. It's sort of that go-between for people who want to play the hardcore games, but they don't want to deal with all the headaches of the PC world. And they can have that. And so you've got a nice little powerful box for that market there. So I don't think consoles are going to go anywhere anytime soon. I think we will be seeing those TV games, though, like just little apps and stuff that'll just pop up on your TV and all of a sudden you're playing, Geometry Wars or something just right off your TV, which would be awesome. I think producers right now are totally experimenting with all different kinds of schedules. We've got, like with PlanetSide, I know John Smedley's talked about the game having an insanely long lifespan, and he's like a big fan of Eve, which is like one of the longest running games out there that they just keep updating. Yep. So you've got weird models like that, and then you've got Battlefield, which is adopting sort of a much quicker pace. They're trying to keep up with Call of Duty. So you've got yearly release titles, and then you've got then there's bigger games like the Elder Scrolls games, which come out every few years, I think. Mm-hmm. Or those take a little bit more time. So I think it just depends on what the game is. Then you got RTS games, and those things come out depending on what they are every like 5 to 10 years. StarCraft, those things have crazy longevities. I think each title in itself is going to develop its own formula for how often they need to release it. And honestly, I think that's fine because they find the right formula for each kind of title, each kind of brand. So I think we're just going to see a bigger diversity. A lot of people trying to copy each other and potentially like doing it right, potentially doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's go on from that and talk a little bit as well about PC now, because we've talked quite a bit about consoles already. PC is quite a different arena, and I'm going to be honest, I'm no expert on that because PC is not my area so much. But one thing, with PC, it doesn't have a kind of it doesn't have a marketing sort of group for each unit, whereas obviously with PS3 you've got Sony, Xbox, Microsoft, Nintendo for their Wii's and all the rest of it. So they have a specific company kind of pushing their product, organizing how it's going to run, working out what's going to go into it, and so on and so on. PCs are really quite they're quite unusual, quite different compared to that, because obviously it doesn't work like that at all. I'm going to speak to Matimi0 on this one. How would you sort of see PC gaming compared to consoles, because it's very, very different, the way you build a PC, the way the technology evolves for that. It's almost more of an organic process where it just kind of happens of its own accord as part of the whole community. What would you say with that, Matimi0?
Well, you have, for PC, you kind of have, you're right, there's games like the first-person shooters and stuff like that, where they're more geared towards the Xbox 360 and the PS3. But then you have games like League of Legends, World of Warcraft, Guild Wars 2 that are completely devoted to the PC. So, on the one hand, you have all these ports that, some are good, some are bad. Modern Warfare 3 comes to mind. I think a lot of people hated that for PC. But then you have, League of Legends, which is the largest game, I think, in the world right now, with millions of viewers on every single day. So I think going forward, it's going to, for developers at least, they're either going to have to, I don't really want to say specialize, because I think it's going to kind of meld and blend together when the technology reaches that point. But I think it's going to continue as it is, more or less, where the bigger titles that attract the console crowd is going to continue. They're going to continue making those games. So for PC games, I think, Blizzard and, Riot Games and other companies that are coming up to the, we got PlanetSide 2, they're going to focus on, that type of, those types of games. And I think they're going to drive the market in that department. So.
Okay, and I think another whole area when it comes into this kind of stuff is the whole mod area. And that's a huge, huge part of PC gaming. Something that almost is exclusive to PC. It doesn't exist at all really within the console world, because it doesn't really work within that situation. But I think it's really interesting. I think it has some unique possibilities, and it comes into games like Battlefield. And I think, Matimi0, did you speak? One of my guys on Twitter, Rusi, said about the color correction thing, and I think you mentioned this actually. I think it was your mailbox actually, because I watched that today. So we were looking at the color correction thing in Battlefield and that sort of stuff. But when we think about mods as well, there's other things like, for example, Minecraft and DayZ. Now, Minecraft is an interesting one, because for ages I thought with Minecraft that the developers themselves were being kind of lazy, and I was like, there's loads of things around here, and they haven't upgraded it enough, and they've started updating it more recently. But with Minecraft, it has this huge modding community, and then we see things like DayZ, which I've seen, and myself, I'm not too sure, but people really like it, and it's something that's kind of caught people's imagination, and they really sort of enjoy that aspect of it. But I'm going to go to Colin, and then perhaps to Level as well about this. With modding and stuff like that, do you think it's something that could ever come to console? But also, what do you think of modding in general in terms of the community? Some people view it as a negative thing, but I think it's kind of an exciting thing, the idea that you can literally hand it over to the community. So start with like a base platform, and then they can just literally run with developing all sorts of things all around that.
Well, I mean, I started my career in sort of the computing, server, internet working, that sort of space. And I mean, this is like 13 or 14 years ago now. And Unix and as sort of Linux evolved, that sort of thing. Back in the day, almost everything that had to do with running the internet and all of these applications that we take for granted today, they all started out as open source, and they got to where they are because of the community and because of, modding and people sharing the code and making changes and sharing it back and that sort of thing. So I think it's fantastic. I'm a huge supporter of it. It's going to be tough to bring that to the consoles as long as the console manufacturers keep the environment proprietary and closed.
Yeah.
If they open things up, and that could also maybe even be the demise of the consoles. Like if they open up gaming so that it's fully functional and you can play whatever you want to play in Linux, for example, and now things become even more moddable and you wind up with some amazing things. I think it's fantastic. I think that the console manufacturers, they're going to hold that pretty close to their chests and try and prevent that sort of thing. I could be totally wrong, but that's kind of how they've operated in the past. That may drive more people towards PC because of the cool stuff that you can do when you open things up to the creative minds of the community, because it's amazing what people can do.
I think it's interesting as well, but I mean, something that I think about is modding is always considered kind of an unregulated thing. It's just something that happens out there. It doesn't really have any moderation. It's just literally whatever people want to do. But with consoles and stuff like that, we know that they're so strict about keeping everything closed because for good reason. They're scared everything's being pirated. Or, for example, with Battlefield, one of the changes made in the recent patch was that to prevent, I think, they said about cheating and how any minor change to any part of the game is considered cheating. I think that was directed more towards PC players than console. But you can understand that, like, developers, if they've spent time and money and a huge amount of work, planning everything, and they've created this game which they think is exactly how they want it to be, they don't want people messing around with it. But I do think it's interesting, the idea that some games could be handed over and given all this stuff. Perhaps the idea that with the consoles, they may work more along the lines of kind of how apps do for Apple. So people would make a mod, they would be given perhaps some kind of code source package, etc., that they are given to work with. They produce some kind of product, send it back for approval, and then if it's given approval, it could go into the system for people to pick up, download and buy, and it's a kind of safe version of that. Level, what do you think about mods in general and perhaps what we've been talking on there?
I would love to see more modding on the console side of things. I never played it, but the most recent Halo game had like a map editor built into it, and people got really creative with that, which like I saw videos of it, like custom made maps and stuff, and I was like really impressed with it. But using the controller interface for that would just be a nightmare. And until they made keyboard and mouse standard on the Xbox, it's something that a lot of people probably won't get into. But in terms of a developer's perspective in making their game moddable or mod friendly, it's frankly stupid not to. The only reason why you shouldn't do it is if you just don't have time, or if it's not in your budget to come out with modding tools, or at least figure out a way to make modding easy for the community. And I think DICE has figured this out. They've already said that the next Battlefield is going to have a little bit more modability to it. They haven't specified what it's going to be, but the fact is that Battlefield 1942 had huge longevity because of some of the mods they came out with. They came out with Desert Combat, which was essentially what Battlefield 2 was. It was just like, oh, look at what these guys, they did Battlefield old school and they made it modern, and it took the game that was sort of dying off and revitalized it with Arma 2 and the DayZ mod. That sold tons of copies. I mean, the fact that Arma 2 was moddable, like, basically made that game right there. So it makes so much sense for developers to do it, and it allows a lot of creative people to actually rise up, and if they make something good enough, to start a game company.
Yeah, definitely. Jake, where are you with modding? Do you enjoy it? Do you think it's a bad thing, good thing? And would you like to see it on the console? How would you envisage that?
Oh man, I don't know if it could ever go to console. I think that the problem we would ultimately run into would be the fact that it's not as easy. Like, for instance, if you're on the PC, you've got the tools you need essentially to make a mod if you know what you're doing. Whereas with console, you'll have to have a PC to go in and develop those apps and stuff like that. So I think that's going to be the major wall that they'll have to get past. I mean, I've always been a big fan of mods. I mean, if you look at the way games kind of unfolded in the early 2000s, I mean, with Counter-Strike and Team Fortress and all that stuff, that was just the catalyst of the PC gaming community for a decade. And it really took a back seat, I think, because a lot of these game companies were very against modding. Because I think it really started with, COD 4, for instance, had some sort of mod potential. There was a little bit you could do with it. But then we come with the next Call of Duty, and Activision is okay, we're not going to support mods.
Yeah.
And it seems like whatever Activision does, EA is close to follow. And then I was actually really surprised when I found out that Battlefield 3 would have ultimately no mod support whatsoever. And I think that stance really killed a lot of opportunities for people. And then you look at DayZ, and I think all these companies are oh, okay, so there's money to be made here. And I think that we're going to see a pretty big increase in that. I don't know if it'll ever translate into console, but I think that from the PC standpoint, I think we're definitely going to see more of it, more mainstream modding here, hopefully. If things go according to plan, I guess.
I'm going to go to John here. When we're thinking about modding and also the way that those two things would work in terms of console, do you think that if it didn't come to console, it might be not actually a bad thing? The idea that maybe, okay, consoles are a completely separate entity. They work in a very, very different way. I think something that people have been having a huge issue with at the moment is the fact that PCs work kind of different, and the fact that a lot of gaming sort of things seem to not gel very well. I mean, Battlefield is a good example to work with, how people are constantly complaining that, the consoles are holding back this game and, they're not doing the same thing and blah, blah, blah. And in a similar way, some console guys are going, we have these huge empty maps and it doesn't play out in the same way. Clearly, it doesn't work very well together for the technical reasons. But when you think of that within the context of modding as well, I mean, Jake is just saying there, modding is really kind of like a PC baby. It's all about that. And I would love to see it more in console, but I'm also kind of intrigued by the idea that mods could be a specific thing within a PC arena, and they really kind of go to town with it and really fully utilize everything that it can do.
Well, I think and Level hinted at this earlier, and it's very true that the console crowd is more about simplicity. I don't know that the console crowd is really interested in modding like the PC crowd would be. I mean, and from my perspective, I have no interest in modding. I just want to sit down and play a game. So, Well,
would you be interested in modding if it was available? If you could play other people's mods on console? Because you may not be interested in making it, but it could be fun to play,
Exactly. And I have seen some games try to get outside of the box. I don't know if any of you guys played Infamous 2. Infamous 2 had something you could go in there and you could basically make your own levels. It wasn't really modding, but it was sort of a design your own map or design your own board kind of thing out of the elements that were already in the game. So that's just, I guess that's not modding, that's really map making, but something like Battlefield 3, especially on the PC, I would love to, or on the consoles, I would love to see given a map making ability or something like that for the community just to be able to go wild and make their own maps, and then some sort of aggregate platform where people can look at that and say, oh, this map's really good, we'll give this map 5 stars, and different maps have different,
That's how the Halo file share was kind of set up.
I'll pick this up here. Has anyone else played Little Big Planet? It might be a PS3 thing, so no one?
I've played
I know it's very popular.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if for people who don't know, haven't played it, etc., of which there may be many, Little Big Planet it's kind of like a very, very creative game on the PlayStation. And the best way to explain it is going to be to just go and look it up. Just type Little Big Planet into YouTube. You'll get a ton of things come up. But the thing that's really awesome about Little Big Planet is that you can fully create and fully design whole levels, and I can't highlight that enough of how much you can actually create with the game. Now, to be honest, it's not something I spent a huge amount of time with, but if you really see the potential of it, the other really good thing about it was that then you could post your levels online. They would be like voted up within the kind of sphere of the Little Big Planet game. So you would go in and look at the worlds, and you'd kind of move around inside, and then you could see whose levels were really, really amazing, go in and play them through. Now, as John was saying, it's kind of like a level builder rather than a mod as such. But I think it does kind of hint towards the possibilities that are available with consoles in terms of what they could do that is like a nod towards modding. I don't think like you say, you're never going to be able to see the same kind of organic open process that you can get with PC, simply because consoles are more restricted in terms of what they allow. But I do think that individual games could provide these kind of development abilities and like give you kind of packs or something. I mean, God, they could sell it and people would buy it, couldn't they? I mean, imagine if Battlefield came out and said, okay, we're going to give you a map making DLC pack. If you buy this pack, you can create your own maps, submit them to the community online, they can get voted up or down, people can play them. That would be hugely popular. Matimi0, what do you think if they brought in something like that for both systems, actually for Battlefield? I mean, I know we're all Battlefield players, but I think within the sphere of gaming as well, that as an idea to go with other games as well would be as successful. What do you think?
I don't think it needs to be something where developers need to like make you pay for it. I mean, we already have a lot. There's a lot of games out there right now, like StarCraft 2, just to name one, and that promote modding for their games, and they have systems that allow for it, and we've already mentioned this. It just really increases the longevity of their game. I want to see more of it for future titles. I think it really does spark creative juices, and I love that. And as we have seen, large games have popped up because of it. DayZ, League of Legends was from Dota. Dota was just a mod from the Warcraft series, and now it's the biggest thing going on right now. So of course I'd like to see more of it, and we're going to get more games because of it. So
I'm just curious, because I was going to make a point on Minecraft. I think the Minecraft modding community is really huge, and there are some amazing mods out there for that game, and the developers have even suggested like licensing or buying the mods from these people to actually implement into Minecraft.
Yeah.
So I was curious what you guys think. Like, what are the legal ramifications? Like, what are the business ramifications of doing something like that? Like, how does a developer say, okay, we're going to allow the community to mod, and if somebody creates an awesome mod, we buy it from them or we put it into the game?
I think Colin will be best placed to probably answer that one. What do you think about that, Colin?
I think that it's it's part of an overall business strategy that they have to plot. So if they're going to sell the mod tools, and if the promise of your creativity leading to financial gain for you sells a bunch of mod kits, for example, win-win, generates more interest in the game, creates cool things that they would have paid their own developers to build. So I think that can certainly foster creativity, and if they play it right, it can be good for business as well. I think one of the reasons that some of the AAA titles, we don't see a great deal of longevity anymore, we don't see a real interest in having the game be moddable, is because they have a new title every year or two, and people buy tens of millions of copies. But when you look at some of the, if you mod it and give the game longevity, well, that kind of sucks for the next release, right? No, I'm going to keep playing this one. But, for the smaller studios, I think that there is definitely a way to generate interest and, potentially a very good business model and lots of awesome creativity and community engagement. So I think it's potentially a great strategy.
Let me just speak a little bit as well, though, about Battlefield. And I think, I don't want to go on about Battlefield because this is a general talk today. But I will say that Battlefield is a good example of what they've done with their sort of updating releases, because they've tried to make them very, very varied rather than going with just a singular thing. So I think they've really tried hard to kind of, increase the lifespan of the game in that process, because they could have just easily kept releasing map packs every now and then, just
right.
2 map packs and then another couple of months, another 2 map packs and so on. Now, it's actually interesting that they have chosen not to do that, and they've gone with this whole close quarters, then we got armored kill, then we've got the next one coming up after that, and so on and so on. It's interesting that they've done that because clearly, for example, armored kill hasn't been as successful overall. I think it would be fair to say that. So when you think about that, it's good that they're actually taking a bit of a risk. They're actually trying out some other things to try and increase the game. They're trying to be a bit varied rather than just doing map packs, which would be the very safe option. Okay, let's go forward into a bit of stuff to about social things here. Matimi0, when we're thinking about like social gaming and so on, the whole thing of kind of, we've talked a little bit about the Wii and the different sort of appeal that the games have to people. Do you think there's a real danger? We've also spoken, like we were saying, about how PCs could become the new hardcore thing. Do you think that, with consoles going forward, they could in danger of becoming a bit sort of mediocre, and that it kind of waters down the whole gaming process because they're trying to appeal to a broader market? Or I don't know if that's really fair to say, because with the PS3, I think it's definitely been focused towards a kind of more hardcore gamer. So has the Xbox. So I don't know. What do you think?
So I don't think, I do believe that they're going to continue to make things more appealing to a larger base. I mean, that's just good business models. That's exactly what they've done for the Call of Duty franchise. They don't really mix things up very much. They make sure that there are some hardcore elements, but for most players, it's just a game you jump into, you shoot people, and then you go about your day. It's, it's just something fun to do. But does that really detract from gaming? I'm not really sure, because I know that there are a lot of people that will say, I'm a hardcore Call of Duty player. And, there's a lot of people out there just say I'm a normal casual Call of Duty player as well. So I think that as long as there is a balance, and I think it's going to be fine. But of course, if they do go down the route where they don't even care about hardcore, as we mentioned earlier, it really is going to need an equilibrium. A good example of this is, I always go back to League of Legends, but that's just because I guess I'm obsessed with it. Mm-hmm. But they cater to both casuals and the competitive scene, and because they cater to the competitive scene, that they have these live streams. This past weekend they had 250,000 people watching at all times, which is crazy. I mean, that's the most I've ever seen it before. And what it does is that for casual players that play, they see the pros, and this is the same thing for sports. You see professional athletes, and you have something to strive for. And if you have a game that doesn't have both elements, and it's just kicking a ball around, and you don't really see what the pros can do, then the game dies off very quickly. And so if people and developers are looking for a lot of longevity, I really like the theme, a lot of balance here.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting as well, this idea of people following games more and watching games more. And the rise of YouTube has been really, really interesting, and also the fact that more people use YouTube as a source of watching. And YouTube obviously isn't a gaming medium as such, but it's a huge focus on YouTube is gaming, and as we all know, because that's what we're doing right now. And by doing this video, people are going to come and watch, they're going to listen. And I know for myself that more and more when I watch TV, I just find there's nothing to watch, whereas I go to YouTube and I can find things I'm really interested about and I want to watch them. For the downside of it, there's a lot of crap as well. But I like this idea that gaming continues to grow, and the whole sort of interaction and combination of things we know you can get YouTube apps now, and they're talking about people being able to watch YouTube in HD through their PS3, and I'm sure Xbox is going to do the same, because I know that with the new Xboxes, when we're thinking about the PS4 and the Xbox whatever it is, they want to call it 720 or whatever, The Xbox, their sort of their key selling point was going to be this, that it's a media hub where you can do a lot of other things into it as well. But I really like this idea that gaming is starting to become kind of a watched subject in itself, and we've seen again huge rise in terms of media from stuff like Machinima and IGN and all these different companies that are starting to produce media content. I'm going to direct this one to Levelcap because I know he kind of doesn't really want to talk about this stuff because I tried to pin him down for several days. But Level, like gaming as a medium, do you think that people are going to want to watch that more, and it's kind of like a sold product where people are becoming, I hate the term kind of celebrity, it's not that, but do you know what I mean? It's kind of like a media that people will come and watch, and that in some ways it might kind of gain that kind of TV audience as such.
Yeah, well, it already has. I mean, League of Legends and StarCraft are like enough said right there. It's already huge. And I've had confirmation within my own subscribers who said they don't even play Battlefield. They are gamers, but they don't play Battlefield. They watch my videos because they find it really entertaining. And then beyond that, I don't really play StarCraft anymore. Like, I tried it a little bit, but I watch StarCraft matches almost every day.
Yeah.
And I'm always out like on the couch, hanging out with my wife or something, watching StarCraft, and she knows Husky StarCraft now and some of the big players that I like to watch. And, she's not getting into it necessarily, but it's the way that anybody gets into sports or something like that. I never played football like in high school or college or anything, but I still watch it a lot because I've become inundated with people who are into football, and all of a sudden I got into it, and now I'm really into it. So I think it's going to have the exact same effect as sports and everything else has. I would probably I'm thinking about watching more League of Legends, and I've never even played it because I just watch it a little, and I'm starting to understand the game, and it actually is entertaining to watch.
Yeah. Colin, what do you think about this in terms of games as entertainment? Do you think they're going to widen up into a much broader market, or do you think it's something that only gamers will understand and therefore they won't really, it'll never really go into a proper wide market area?
No, I think that it's becoming more mainstream, and it, by virtue of that fact, it's going to start to appeal to a larger audience. As people stumble across videos on YouTube, maybe they're entertained. I mean, who would have thought that the whole commentator thing would have been a genre like 5 years ago?
Yeah.
And I think that there is an appetite for that sort of thing, and people tune into it. It's growing, and I do see it. I don't see it overtaking cinema per se, but I don't think that it's plateaued as far as its appeal.
Another funny thing is I often get this from people that I work with, and it's trailers for games. It's kind of funny. I've had people coming to me at work the next day and they were like, oh, I saw this trailer on TV and I thought it was a movie. Turns out, no, it was just a game. When you think about stuff like Grand Theft Auto and Dishonored, they make such cinematic game trailers now that people, non-gamers get confused. They think it's just like a film or something, but it turns out, no, it's just a game. I find that very funny that they're sort of missing out on this whole area. But when we think about gaming moving to a larger market, I think worryingly it's not going to be for a while. It's little by little. The kind of people you get playing the Wii and stuff like this, they're not what I would classify as gamers. They're casual gamers. They're the kind of people who enjoy playing those silly games on their phones, which you literally just press a button and you jump and you jump and you jump and you jump. What's that game? Anyone got that or know it? It's like this little man running along and you jump over things. I've never bothered to look at it, or
there's like 80 of them.
I was gonna say, is that all games on the phones?
No, it's a specific one that people love. You run along this little.
Is it like a Stickman game or something?
I think I know what you're talking about. It was the first one to really take off on
like an
the
adventure
iPhone or something.
I was going home the other day on the train, and this woman next to me was playing it, and I was just looking at it, kind of with this expression of like, what is that? What are you doing? Literally, this little man running along, auto. She didn't have to control like him running or anything. Literally, and then you'd get to like a very easily noticeable object, and she'd just be like, press, press. And then it's like you hear people in the media and stuff like this saying about like, yeah, tablet gaming's really going to take off. How is it going to possibly ever take off when this is the limit of it? It's just no way. It just appeals to these kind of people who, you know, it's just literally a pastime. It's literally it's like playing bloody Minesweeper or Solitaire. They're not looking for any kind of proper challenge or kind of real game. It's literally just a pastime. That's all it is.
That game sounds an awful lot like Pitfall on the Atari, which I invested a great deal of hours playing.
In fairness, do you think these people had Ataris? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't see that. But, you know, I think there is definitely like a really interesting place for tablet games. I really do. There's other stuff that you can do with them. I'm just going to say as well, Journey, all right? I don't know if people have seen or played Journey here, because I don't know if anyone... John,
yeah, I played it. Yeah, I gave it a shot. It was awesome. I enjoyed it.
It's such a good game, and I think other people may have seen it. But Journey as a game is something that could work so well on tablets because, or phones or whatever, because it works really well. I'll tell you what else works really well on tablets and stuff is Riven and Myst. You know, classic games. I really love those games. And
yeah, point and click adventures, man.
Yeah, exactly. All this kind of stuff. And also think about, I'll tell you what else is good. I've got it as well, is Broken Sword. All those kind of puzzle adventure games. So, you know, when you think about games that have a narrative and they're like puzzle solving things, those work really, really well on tablets. This idea of like, it, you know, challenges your mind in a different way. It's not about reaction time or anything like this, because Level, like you were saying, those systems are never going to be able to cope with the kind of stuff that you would need to run like Battlefield or Call of Duty or anything like that. It's just not going to happen. And they also don't have the controller sensibility, you know, to be able to work in that way. Although I will say, it's an interesting product which was coming out, which I will find. Yeah, this product called the Wikipad. Don't like the name, but basically what it is it's kind of like, it's a pad designed more for gaming, and it also has like a shell that goes around it, and that shell has kind of like two nunchucks kind of attached to the side of it, so it basically becomes like a giant handheld gaming device. Now, the first thing that I would think about because they were going, oh yeah, this is going to be for gamers to sort of play on the go and all this kind of thing, and I was just thinking, well, the thing is, it's all very well to say that, but when you've got stuff like the Vita, which is more compact, probably has a higher spec and just generally does more, I think that's more appealing than have a giant pad. I'll tell you as well, I don't like carrying around a giant tablet. I've seen people carrying their iPads and stuff when they're going to work or whatever, and they just seem cumbersome and kind of irritating, and you know, it's much better to have your phone. You can just put it in your pocket. It does everything that the iPad pretty much does, just in a more compact version. Okay, so let's just think as well about some of the other technology, some of the more headset stuff, which is tailored towards more of a hardcore gamer market. Stuff like the goggles, if people have seen, you can get these goggles which give you a 50-inch widescreen view. You can wear them very close up. Now, I kind of always questioned the health of that, whether it would really hurt your eyes to constantly be, yeah, you know. I didn't really like the idea of having like these bright visual things strapped to my eyes. I didn't really like the concept of that. But there are other things coming along, like the Oculus Rift virtual reality headset. If people haven't seen, check that out as well. The idea with that is that as you move, it turns you on screen. Now, it always seems a little bit gimmicky to me, that kind of thing, like we've talked about with motion things as well, but it is designed to be completely immersive in that you have your headset, it would block off any external sort of vision and stuff like that. For hardcore gamers, people who really want to be completely immersed in the game, and it doesn't have to be FPS based. Think about things like Skyrim, stuff like this, games which are designed to pull you right in. You know, Level, do you think that's a very attractive prospect, or do you think it's like a step too far?
I'm interested in it. The Oculus Rift seems really interesting in terms of, I like the idea of peripheral vision gaming, like because in a first-person shooter especially, you know, you're sort of, it's like looking through a little porthole and then trying to go around and be tactical, where in any sort of real life tactical situation, you're going to have your peripheral vision. You're not going to have to constantly whip your head around all the time looking for bad guys, which is what you see in any sort of YouTube video or people playing video games. They're just looking all over the place like maniacs, and having that kind of peripheral vision would be awesome. So that's why I'm kind of interested in the Oculus Rift type technology. I don't know if that kind of thing can actually catch on, just because people, if they have to start wearing something to play a game, that's a huge detraction from it. So,
well, I'll tell you else, a problem I think immediately with that is, I don't know if anyone else ever has this problem, but just wearing a big pair of headphones, let alone a whole thing that goes on your head, my head gets so hot just from having headphones on for such a long period of time, you know, because you have like these very warm kind of soft things wrapped around your ears, and it just makes you really, really hot. I don't like wearing it for extended periods of time. So the idea of wearing a kind of helmet based thing which sits all around your face, and you know, the Oculus as well as those little headsets, the idea of having like a very bright screen at almost like no distance from your eyes, I'm really not too sure about the concept of that. Jake, what do you think about that?
I'm not a big fan of that, to be honest. Did you guys ever play the Virtual Boy?
No. Yes. Biggest waste of money.
It was like, it was the stupidest.
It was awesome.
It was a cool concept, but stupid implementation, because like you like put your face down under this little bitty thing, and it was like so awkward. Like I remember being a kid and I was already felt like, you know, I'm too big to do this, because the way you kind of propped it up, it just wasn't comfortable. And that's kind of how I feel about anything that you have to put in front of your face. Not to mention you have to factor in like glasses and like, you know, can glasses fit over it? How's that going to affect it? And having that like 3 inches from your face, I can't imagine that being like a rewarding experience.
I think
so. Also the Virtual Boy, if you played it for any extended period of time, you'd have this giant ring around your eyes.
Yeah.
You're done. You look like an idiot for about an hour.
Well, okay, I mean, when we're thinking about these kind of other modifications and stuff like this, now, I don't know, has anybody else seen the kind of thought-based stuff that they're doing, where you have little headsets and you can make simple commands by thinking?
Not gonna happen.
Well, I'll tell you.
I've researched the shit out of it. It's not gonna happen.
No, I mean, that's the thing. For games, yeah. I mean, people have sort of said that it could happen, but in a kind of extended extended scale of time. But if you've researched it loads, you know, tell us why would it not happen?
Well, okay, so everybody has different brain waves, right? Like my thought for go forward, or whatever I would say map to the W key on the keyboard or the up on the joystick, looks completely different from what yours would look like. So one, you have a very extensive setup process for the device where you literally have to map tons of commands, and on top of that, then you have to remember the commands. It's like, what did I think of for go forward? It's a little bit different because, especially depending on the kind of mood you're in or the situation you're in, those brainwaves can change a little bit. And on top of that, it's like remapping an entire set of muscle memory, like on the flash. It's like having a third arm and trying to learn how to use it all of a sudden. So I'll say I want to talk to Matimi0 tactically while we're playing, and then think at the same time, like go forward, move left, like all that stuff while shouting out call outs and stuff. It's incredibly hard. And unless you're brought up from like childhood to know how to operate a brain computer interface device, then it's going to be incredibly hard to get extremely fast with it. I could see it maybe working for 1 or 2 basic commands, or being great for people who are sort of bound to a wheelchair or don't have movement of their limbs, then it'd be a great device for them. But in terms of like replacing a keyboard and mouse, I really just don't think it's going to happen.
No, I mean, that's what I was going to say, was that it wasn't so much the idea of literally taking full control, but more a simple command thing. So it could be like reload. You know, and I think from what I had seen, they were looking not so much at specific thoughts like you were talking about, where, okay, you have the idea of move forward, turn left, or, you know, aim your gun left or whatever like that. It was not so much that, it was more generalized. So kind of when you have a certain feeling or certain thought, it will activate like a certain area of your brain. So you could think about a specific thing, and it's kind of more generalized, because obviously, as we know, different areas of your brain relate to different feelings, thoughts, activities, functions, and all these kind of things. So the idea that you could activate a certain area and it would react consequently to that. So perhaps, I don't know, I'm literally just making this up because I don't know the details of it. Let's just say you think about ice cream, and that would be the thing that makes your gun reload on screen, which is kind of random. But but I think that was where it was kind of moving towards more generalized, not so specific. And if it could do basic functions, like for example, people were thinking along the lines of opening a door or something like that, just anything that would make the game a little bit smoother. But regardless, I mean, that's a long way off. But I think it's interesting to think of within the context of other peripheral ideas that you could bring into the gaming world. Jake, have you got anything to think about that?
I feel like when gaming gets to the point where there's so many different things that you have to factor in, it's like, I like the simplistic, mouse and keyboard. And then after that, it's like, okay, I don't need facial recognition, it like looking at your face and kind of scanning it and telling what mood you're in. Because isn't there a game that they were developing that for the PC that was like based on like facial expressions? Do you guys remember that? I think it still might be in development. I don't remember what it was though. I probably should have researched that. But it's just something that's like, do we really need that in a game? It's like,
I mean, do you think it's kind of interesting to think about in itself is like, have we got to a point where there isn't much more we can develop in terms of actual peripherals? That, all these kind of headsets are great in terms of what they can provide. They're kind of cool, but they're frustrating and they're kind of cumbersome, and they've never, I mean, all these kind of headset things people have been trying to do it for years, but it doesn't really work out because they're kind of a pain in the ass, and they're always a bit clicky, and people like the simplicity. That's why consoles are great, because you literally just pick up your gamepad and you're ready to go. PC games, like you say, are simple, and they're great because you can kind of bind all sorts of different things. And what other tool do you need other than your hands? Okay, the hands are the best tool that's ever evolved and been made over like thousands and millions of years. Your hands have just become it's like a perfectly evolved thing that can do so many functions already. When you think about how mobile your hands are in terms of what they can do and stretch, and Level, I mean, your mouse that you use, don't you have like a load of other little buttons within that for on the side of that?
Definitely, it's like you got the MMO mouse and then the FPS mouse, and like first-person shooter gamers really don't want all those buttons. We need simple, straightforward. We can't afford to make mistakes, in a split second like that. So, I mean, literally, I like the idea of reducing controls. I always hate it when a new first-person shooter comes out and it's like, there's a button for lean left and lean right and do this and do that. And it's like, no, just make it simple. Allow me to use combinations of keys that I'm already using to perform the task or something, and complexity is something that is going to frighten a lot of people and be really hard to sell.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing as well, is when you think about what stage you come into gaming, some people have a really very basic understanding, and so you throw them in the deep end with tons of complicated controls and sort of motion things and all this kind of stuff. It's really difficult for them to kind of get to grips with it. So yeah, I think it's kind of interesting, and I think that perhaps in terms of peripheral technology anyway, it's kind of reached a peak, and there was so much. I mean, for example, look at the PlayStation controller. It's pretty much not changed throughout all of their systems. The reason is they put so much research into it initially that afterwards they didn't need to change it. So it hasn't changed. It's stayed the same because it feels good. It does exactly all the things it needs to. They haven't, for example, added any new buttons to it. Okay, you've got 2 shoulder buttons, your 4 buttons, the D-pad, and your analog sticks. That's all you need. And it's also good because think about this. If they start making all sorts of crazy technology, then developers are going to have to, they're going to have to factor that in when they start designing games. It's bad enough that they've got motion controllers all over the place already, and now you start talking about, okay, can we do this, can we do that, is it going to be compatible, is it not? You're just reducing the market. So much better that they produce something that everyone can get on board with and get into easily. And when you think about games and the fact that they're making them across multiple platforms, that comes in as well there. So I think we've covered.
I like the voice command Pikachu game. Where you go, Pikachu attack, and they had that on the I think it was the
TV.
GameCube. Maybe
no, it was N64, wasn't it?
Oh, was it? Yeah, where you had like a little microphone built into the
Pikachu
controller.
TV or something, right?
Something like that, and you could tell him to do stuff.
Hey, you Pikachu. That's what it was.
That was. I like that. It was simple, straightforward, and everybody knew the commands from the show. It was like Pikachu, Thunderstrike, or some crap like that, and then you do it.
Oh, you know the skills. You know their attacks.
I do. I have first edition Pokemon cards, dude. Yeah.
Did any of you guys see the recent patent filing by Microsoft for the, I guess it's possibly the new Kinect, where it looks like there's a projector built into it that projects onto the walls surrounding the television of like the peripheral vision of the game.
That's kind of interesting. I mean, it's No, I mean, they've tried to do this thing with peripheral TV before, where they've kind of had like color signatures and stuff like that kind of floating around. And I don't know, it's kind of on par with some of this other motion stuff. It's all kind of like, I don't know whether it really enhanced my gaming thing to have stuff projected around the room and stuff. I can't see why I would want that. And I don't know, they're all trying to innovate and they're all trying to do other things. And when you think about like the Wii U as well, Wii U is really interesting in terms of the stuff that it can do. Whether or not it would actually be necessary, I don't know. I'll tell you what, I'll just tell you, the only thing that I really liked about the Wii U was that the idea of like, if you're playing like a Resident Evil game where you have like a backpack with kit in, you could like have that within your Wii U thing. So you maybe have your tablet sort of thing right next to you and you're selecting equipment on that, but at the same time you're playing in the game screen at the same time. So you can kind of multitask between the two things. I like the idea of doing that rather than having to constantly like change out the menu and go back again, you know? So there's things like that. I think there's a lot of scope for having like another little piece of equipment with you that you can do other elements on and stuff like that.
Right. I mean, that's the thing with all this like stuff. It's so hard to say yes, it's cool, no, it's not, until you really like get your hands on it and try it out for yourself.
Yeah. And Kinect was probably like the worst thing from like, you guys probably don't play console, but Kinect has a built-in microphone, and if you ever go into like a Call of Duty lobby or a Battlefield lobby on Xbox, you can tell when someone has a Kinect. It's quite annoying.
Do they say like reload and stuff?
Well, you can like hear like the game sound. You'll hear like and I'm like, what is that? And it sounds really like washed out, and then you realize the kid has his Kinect on, and you can hear like mom in the kitchen like washing dishes.
Yeah, that happens a little bit. I mean, yeah, it's always frustrating, and I think we have a potential Battlefield Friends episode sort of about this, where you have to deal with a guy with a really shitty microphone.
Yeah, and a load of stuff going on in the background and things.
You're sitting there trying to talk to your squad buddies, and all you hear is just grating sound coming out of this one guy.
Right, I think we've reached a good end point here with all the things that we've been talking about tonight. So I want to thank John from Battlefield Friends. I want to thank DCRU Colin, Jake Intheworksmedia, Matimi0, and Levelcap. So this has been The Future of Gaming with Luetin and the panel team. Thanks for watching. More stuff to come very soon.